For decades, the US dollar has been more than just a currency. It has been a symbol of strength, stability, and global dominance. It has been the language in which the world conducts trade, the standard against which wealth is measured, and the backbone of an international system built after the devastation of World War II. For most Americans, its value seems untouchable, a given. For much of the world, it is a lifeline. And yet, the cracks are beginning to show. In recent years, one policy decision after another has begun to strain the foundations of that trust. Tariffs.
Tariffs is the most beautiful word to me in the dictionary.
Tariffs. This is a direct attack.
Once a tool for protecting domestic industries, have become a double-edged sword. They are intended to shield the economy, but in practice, they have exposed vulnerabilities, disrupted global trade, and may, in time, contribute to a weakening of the very currency that underpins the American way of life. The story begins with a series of trade confrontations. One of the most notable in recent memory has been the tariff war between the United States and Canada.
The second time the Senate voted to knock down Donald Trump's tariffs on Canada.
Tariffs are hurting our economy, hurting our citizens, hurting our businesses. Let's terminate this bogus emergency.
Historically, Canada has been one of America's closest economic partners, neighbours, allies, and trading partners for generations. Yet in the last few years, tariffs have been introduced on steel, aluminum, and other key goods. In response, Canada imposed retaliatory measures. What was once a seamless exchange of goods across the northern border became a battleground. Farmers, manufacturers, and small businesses found themselves caught in the crossfire, paying more for materials, losing markets, and facing uncertainty that rippled across the economy. Adding a layer of complexity to this confrontation was the surprising use of Ronald Reagan's image in a campaign defending tariffs.
Someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports. It looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. America's jobs and growth are at stake.
Ads featuring the former president's smiling visage, coupled with a message of economic nationalism, attempted to lend historical legitimacy to modern policies. It was a curious choice. Reagan, the champion of free markets and a believer in international alliances, repurposed posthumously to advocate for measures that many economists argued would strain global trade and harm American consumers.
They give you a choice of about 7 different desks, but this is the one I chose. Ronald Reagan had it. FDR had it.
Ronald Reagan is a revered figure in the Republican Party. He's widely regarded as one of the great presidents of the 20th century. And Donald Trump has repeatedly paid homage to him throughout his political career and tried to compare his presidency to Reagan's.
The symbolism was not lost on the public. It raised questions about the long-term consequences of political messaging divorced from historical context.
Reorganizing Reagan's words.
When someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. But over the long run, such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. Throughout the world, there's a growing realization that the way to prosperity for all nations is rejecting protectionist legislation and promoting fair and free competition. America's jobs and growth are at stake.
At the heart of these trade disputes lies a broader concern: the potential weakening of the US dollar. The currency's value, once unassailable, is now under pressure. The tariffs that were meant to protect domestic industries have in practice increased costs, disrupted supply chains, and contributed to inflation. Investors and foreign governments watch these moves closely. Every disruption, every economic ripple is a reminder that the dollar's dominance is not invincible. To understand why this is so alarming, we must go back to the origins of the dollar's global power. The United States did not become the center of the financial world overnight. It took decades of economic growth, political stability, and crucially, the aftermath of a world war that left European powers exhausted and indebted. By the end of World War II, dollar had emerged as a global standard. The Bretton Woods Agreement of 1944 established it as the anchor currency, pegged to gold at $35 an ounce. Countries around the world held dollars as reserves, confident that the currency was backed by tangible wealth. The US could print its currency, but it did so with the assurance that each note was tied, directly or indirectly, to gold stored in Fort Knox.
To Fort Knox to make sure the gold is there. Don't be totally surprised. We opened the door, we'll say, there's nothing here. They stole this too. We're actually going to Fort Knox to see if the gold is there, because maybe somebody stole the gold.
Fort Knox itself became a symbol of this security. Vaulted deep underground, it held tens of thousands of tons of gold, a physical guarantee that the dollar was not mere paper. For decades, the system worked. The world trusted the dollar because the US economy was robust, stable, and militarily powerful. The dollar was not only money, it was a promise of reliability in an unpredictable world. This arrangement, however, was not permanent. In 1971, President Richard Nixon closed the gold window, ending the direct convertibility of the dollar into gold.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
The world shifted from a gold-backed currency to fiat money, a currency backed solely by the trust in the government that issues it. This transition, though managed carefully at the time, introduced a new vulnerability. The dollar's value was no longer guaranteed by a tangible asset, but by faith. Faith in the US economy, faith in its institutions, faith in its policies. For decades, that faith endured. The dollar remained the global reserve currency, even as other countries experimented with their own forms of monetary management. Germany, Japan, the United Kingdom, each nation at some point relied on the dollar for stability, often pegging their own currencies or holding dollars as reserves to protect their economies. The dollar's dominance was reinforced by trade agreements, military alliances, and the sheer scale of the American market. It became not just money, but the currency of power. Yet history offers a cautionary tale. No currency, no matter how dominant, lasts forever. The Roman denarius, once the backbone of a sprawling empire, gradually lost value due to overproduction and political instability. The British pound, which had dominated global trade for centuries, weakened in the face of war debts and economic shifts. Each time a currency faltered, the consequences were profound. Trade networks unraveled, empires contracted, and global influence waned. Currency is not just an economic tool, it is a reflection of power, credibility, and trust. Lose it, and the consequences ripple far beyond the treasury. In this light, modern US policies, particularly tariffs, take on added significance. Tariffs can protect industries in the short term, but they also disrupt global markets, increase costs for consumers, and provoke retaliation. As global trade becomes more complex and interconnected, these disruptions can erode confidence in the dollar. Investors may begin to question whether the US can maintain its economic dominance. Foreign governments may diversify away from dollar holdings, seeking more stable or predictable alternatives. The cumulative effect could be a gradual but significant decline in the dollar's value, a decline that could reshape the global economy. To understand the stakes, consider the psychological weight of the dollar. For many, it is more than just currency, it is a standard of stability. International contracts are priced in dollars. Oil, food, machinery, most global commodities rely on the dollar. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle, and it is widely used because it is dominant. But cycles can break. Confidence, once shaken, is difficult to restore. Historical precedent suggests that no empire, no matter how powerful, is immune to the consequences of mismanaged currency or overextended financial policies. Donald Trump's tariff policies, often framed as a return to American strength, illustrate this delicate balance. Steel, aluminum, agricultural products. These were areas targeted to protect domestic industries.
Donald Trump, who changes his mind between, breakfast 11's his lunch and supper time.
Yet in practice, they increased costs for manufacturers, strained relationships with allies, and created uncertainty in markets that had relied on predictability for decades. The US dollar, always a reflection of confidence, absorbed these shocks. Every trade dispute, every retaliatory measure subtly undermined the perception of stability that underpins a currency used by billions worldwide. History tells us that decline rarely happens overnight. The fall of the Roman denarius took centuries. The British pound's weakening unfolded over decades, yet the patterns are clear. Overextension, economic mismanagement, and erosion of trust are consistent drivers. The same lessons apply today.
Are you going to lay out any new additional tariffs before?
I don't want to talk about it. I'm going to hope that we win. I can't imagine that anybody would do that kind of devastation to our country.
The dollar may not collapse tomorrow, but the seeds of vulnerability are visible to anyone willing to look. Tariffs, trade wars, and political uncertainty are not merely domestic policy choices. They are forces that ripple across the global economy, influencing how nations perceive the US and its currency. The implications extend beyond economics. A weakening dollar affects geopolitical power, the ability to fund military commitments, and the influence of the United States in international institutions. Currency is a form of soft power. When the dollar falters, so too does the perception of American dominance. Allies and rivals alike watch closely. Each policy decision sends a signal. Is the US financially disciplined, strategically coherent, and capable of maintaining the trust of the world? Or is it taking steps that may ultimately erode decades of carefully built credibility? Some may argue that the US has tools to prevent decline. Interest rates, fiscal policy, international alliances, these can stabilize the currency.
What is your plan if they end up making a decision that's not in your favor?
Well, I'd rather discuss that later. I hope we're going to win that case. I think it's one of the most important cases in the history of our country.
But tools are only as effective as the confidence in those wielding them. The moment doubt enters the system, the risk grows. Tariffs, particularly when applied in ways that disrupt trusted trade relationships, act as accelerants to that risk. They are a reminder that global perception matters as much as domestic economic outcomes. The story of the dollar is also a story of human trust. Its value, once backed by gold and stored in the vaults of Fort Knox, later relied on the belief in the American system. That belief has underpinned decades of global prosperity, trade, and relative stability. And yet, as history shows, no system lasts forever. Tariffs, trade wars, and political messaging that prioritize short-term gains over long-term stability may chip away at that belief faster than many realize. Other nations have faced similar crossroads. Ancient Rome debased its currency to pay armies and fund projects, only to face inflation and loss of public confidence. Britain's overextended financial commitments after World War I and II forced austerity measures, devaluation, and a slow loss of influence. In each case, the result was the same. A once dominant power saw its economic foundation weaken, with ripple effects across society and the world. The lesson is stark. Currency is not invulnerable, and policies that seem domestically advantageous can have profound global consequences. Today, the US stands at a similar juncture. The dollar remains dominant, but it is not immune. Trade tensions, tariffs, and policy uncertainty are creating a landscape in which confidence is tested. The story of the dollar is a reminder that power is fragile, that economic dominance is not guaranteed, and that decisions made in Washington have consequences that echo from Wall Street to the streets of cities around the globe. The decline of the dollar is not inevitable. There is still time to prioritize stability, maintain international trust, and manage policies in ways that reinforce the currency's role in the world. But history warns us not to be complacent. Every empire, every dominant currency faces limits. Tariffs may protect industries in the short term, but they also carry the seeds of long-term consequences. The dollar, like any currency, is only as strong as the faith the world places in it. And so, the question remains, will the United States heed the lessons of history, or will the combination of policy choices, economic pressures, and global shifts set in motion a gradual decline? The dollar, the symbol of American power for generations, is at a crossroads. Its future is uncertain, and the stakes could not be higher for the US, for the world, and for the fragile trust that underpins the global economy. History has shown us the way empires fall, currencies collapse, and the mighty are humbled. The dollar is no exception. It is a story still being written, and one that deserves our attention, reflection, and perhaps a measure of caution.